of bad intentions that you had to operate through
Hmm.
in order to extract an extra dollar, right? You can't live a regular decent life that's not exploitative enough. And so if you've been able to mass $1 billion, you've done it because you've taken that $1 billion from someone else. You haven't paid your employees enough. You've not paid their health benefits. Jeff Bezos is a perfect example.
Hmm.
You know, you have Amazon, which before the Affordable Care Act had a majority of had many full time employees,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
When the Affordable Care Act comes along, anyone who worked over, I think it's 35 hours a week, is considered full time.
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos then eliminates most of his full
Right.
time work, right? You can't work that many hours, so you become part time, just so that Jeff Bezos doesn't have to pay your health care, right? Walmart and the Walmart empire is an example of they build WalMarts in places and then don't pay their employees enough to afford even a decent living, and so
Hmm.
many Walmart employees are also living on food stamps and Medicare and so forth. So society is providing an income that is being diverted into the Walmarts and the Amazons and these other entities. They are living, they are accumulating their wealth because they're not giving back to society what society has given to them. Walmart would be, well, and Amazon would be nothing except for the public transportation system, which we paid for.
Right. Right.
They didn't have to pay for it, and they're not paying for health care and we're paying for food stamps for Walmart and Amazon employees.
Wow. I mean, so all of this is happening, and it seems that the Black Power Media YouTube link decided to work. I don't know what's going on. People have come in, so yay. Welcome, y'all. Tacy, Ready Revolutionary One, Arif Hassan, Iyapo Yapa. Glad to see you. Um, so all of this is happening. The venture capitalists are buying up trailer parks now. What does a housing crisis look like when we're talking about now trailer parks? We
Hmm.
talked about earlier the 2008 crash,
Hmm.
and all indications are that we are in for another housing bubble
Right.
burst. What
Well,
does this look like now when you're talking about trailer parks included in
mhm.
that?
Yeah, we're certainly in for another crash, right? There was certainly a housing bubble leading up to 2008, where it was popular to buy houses, to flip them, and so forth and so on. And so, people are in the process of buying a house that is overpriced, but they know that, or at least they believe that they'll be able to sell the house at more after they fixed up a little bit, right? And so
Hmm.
we have this process of people chasing money that creates a bubble. And then we have the crash. Now, the crash in housing had nothing to do with the bubble in housing.
Oh.
The crash in housing has to do with fraud on Wall Street in terms of mortgage-backed securities.
Hmm.
You they blame it on prime rate subprime mortgage holders, the poor, right? Saying
Hmm.
that the subprime mortgage holders, the economy went bad, they lost their jobs, they couldn't pay their mortgages, and so the housing market starts to fall, and that this escalates into the 2008 crisis. That wouldn't have been the first time we've had housing bubbles burst. What leads to the crisis, to the crash in 2008, was these derivatives that were false paper, false
Hmm.
that was not. Uh, Marx called it fictitious capital. What? Not really capital, right?
Uh-huh. Not
It
real money.
doesn't represent anything real. A mortgage
Hmm.
represents a house. A mortgage-backed security is supposed to represent thousands of houses,
Hmm.
but then you have this other derivative called a collateralized debt obligation, which is an insurance policy on this. And so, in prior to the 2008 crisis, we had $7 trillion in mortgages in this country, and we have $40 trillion of insurance policies on mortgages. And so when the mortgage process starts to decline a bit, that gets amplified into a collapse in the financial industry, right? It got amplified. It had nothing to do
Right.
with it. The housing market would have recovered,
Mm-hmm.
but the finance market, which was derived from the housing market, that couldn't recover. And
Right.
so, and now I also have to say this: if the finance industry had collapsed, it would that's Wall Street. The real economy would have gone on fine.
You mean
But
to tell me that this society wouldn't have crumbled and burned, and people wouldn't have, that there wouldn't have been, mass suicides and
we would have recovered. There wasn't that big a downturn in housing.
wow.
But the Wall Streeters, Goldman Sachs, through with the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, convinced the government that if finance collapsed, everything would have collapsed, and so they got the Federal Reserve to bail them out, and so the government now being passed on to President Obama. That problem is the mortgage back the assets, the mortgage backed securities that were
Hmm.
called troubled assets. You had TARP, Troubled Asset Recovery Program,
Right.
right? They were trouble. They were basically junk bonds, worth
Mm-hmm.
nothing. The government buys them at face value, as if they were AAA.
Oh wow.
So the government creates money, and finance goes on, and not only does it do well, but it accumulates that money to buy the houses that are in foreclosure, and they're using that money now to buy trailer parks.
Oh my God.
So
That
so, so
just
yeah, so the government has been captured by finance, and they are financing that we are financing this buying up of real estate by these predatory financial institutions. So we don't have a bubble right now, but we are heading for a crash.
So we've got a couple of questions for you in the chat. Comrade Kwame asks, how is it possible to have more assets than currency?
It's not more assets than currency. Actually, the 7 trillion I mentioned, those were the assets.
Mm-hmm.
They represented mortgages on houses. The 40 trillion is the insurance policy on the assets. Now understand how absurd that is. I buy a house,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say my house is worth 200,000. I go buy an insurance policy. I pay a premium. The premium is worth 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
If my house burns down, it's worth 200,000. The estimated rebuilding is 200,000. So the assets and the insurance match.
Right.
I'm the only one who can buy an insurance policy on my house. You can't buy an insurance policy on my
Right.
house because if you buy an insurance policy, you might want to burn my house down so you can get paid.
Exactly.
You know, that's called moral hazard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with a mortgage-backed security, with on that $200,000, let's say five other people buy insurance policies on my house. They now mortgage-backed security is like an insurance policy, but it's not really insurance because insurance regulations would have stopped that from happening.
Mm.
And but it is an insurance policy so that if something happens to my house, everybody who owns an insurance policy is supposed to be paid, but there's not enough money to pay them. So the question about assets and currency, there's less currency than assets, but there's this inflation of insurance policies that say that have more insurance than assets, but you don't have more currency than assets. You have the same currency, so there's not enough currency to pay off the insurance policy. And that process of allowing that to happen was due to a couple of things that happened in the Clinton administration,
Mm.
where you had Secretary of the Treasury, who was Larry Summers, You
back
may
in
have heard
Clinton.
that in Clinton. You may have heard his name recently because he's talking about inflation and all that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Larry Summers has a very sordid history that we could go through in many cases. But when he was Secretary of the Treasury, he prior to that he had advised some of these financial institutions on how to set up mortgage-backed securities. And so, as Secretary of the Treasury, there was a movement to regulate mortgage-backed securities,
Mm-hmm.
which would have stopped the leveraging of insurance policies against actual assets.
Mm-hmm. But
And he and Larry Rubin prevented that from happening. So they prevented regulation, and then 10 years later we have a collapse.
and who does Obama choose to manage the TARP asset fund? But Larry
Yeah,
Summers.
yeah,
Okay, that's a whole nother show.
yeah. It is.
There's another question. Big Teal asks, "What is a recovered housing market?" Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, I suspect that term is used to indicate what occurs after you have the crash,
Mm-hmm.
and now things are settling off again, and you start to see people buying houses again, and housing prices are going up. Because of course, what happened in the crash, 2008 was you have a house that on the books is worth 300,000,
Mm-hmm.
but on the market is only worth 200,000 because people aren't buying anymore. So you're underwater. Your house is worth less than your house is worth less than you owe more on your house than its value.
Right.
Well,
That.
that's an upside down situation. When that
Mm-hmm.
situation turns over and the housing value goes back up more than what you owe on it, then you're recovered in that sense, right? And so
Wow.
you're no longer underwater. And then you'll start to see housing values begin to go up again. That's happened slowly since 2008. So I say we're not in a bubble. Housing values shot up right before 2008,
Mm-hmm.
declined and began to recover, but we're not in a bubble situation now. We will be. All the indications are we will be shortly in a not in a bubble, in a crisis situation. Housing starts are going down. They've declined about 10% this year. People are not buying. Housing prices are up, but also people who are working are not making the incomes that they need to make in order to buy housing and so forth. That's also driving the trailer park exploitation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to shout out Iyapo Yapa, who said, "By the way, thank you for a discussion that does not involve a celebrity, rapper, or beef, and talking about something that actually affects my life directly. Thank you." Thank you, Iyapo. I
Thank you.
have to be honest and tell you, I really don't pay too much attention to celebrity, too much of anything. I have things that I enjoy watching on television, and most of them are on streaming services, and I stick to that. I don't follow, and I've never been that kind of a person. I mean, I watched C-SPAN in high school for fun. So,
Yeah, yeah.
you're not going to get too much celebrity commentation from me. I just that's
You,
another
you, you,
world of
you, you,
people that I honestly don't care too much about.
you're not going to do a program on the Jay-Z Kanye the dispute,
I mean, I've done a program on why Jay-Z is a capitalist that we need to eat just like the rest of the rich. But
Okay.
but other than that, not
Yeah,
not really. I mean,
yeah.
I will talk about zombie movies for hours. but but other than that, no. I mean, this is and I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm actually glad Iyapo said that, because I was talking to um one of my comrades at work today, because I'm back in the studio, kind of not really part-time, but I'm in the studio for 2 weeks. Sean Blackman, the host of By Any Means Necessary, is on
Mhm.
vacation. That brother deserves vacation, because this past year has been one hellscape of a ride for me.
Yeah.
And this, my health issues are just, the icing cake, icing on the top of a, you know, cake of poop for me this past year. Um, so I'm in the studio for 2 weeks while he's on vacation. I'll be in the studio maybe 2 days a week for 2 weeks after that because I'll be on in dialysis training. I'll be training
Mm.
to learn how to do home hemodialysis. That's a 6 to 8 week process. But there are some scheduling issues with the nurses because they need to go on vacation too,
Mm.
because we don't want to overwork workers, no matter how much we might feel like we are inconvenienced. So I'll be in the studio a couple of days for a couple of weeks. I don't know how that's going to work out. I have to be sure not to scratch this thing because it itches like crazy. But but someone was asking me. Someone asked me, you know, why I pay attention to these little issues like
Mm.
what we're talking about today, because
Mm.
talking about them. I was talking about this article to them, and I said these issues have never been little to me
Mm.
because even when I was like neoliberalish in my thinking, and there was a time when I was in high school and I thought the Democrats were great, and you
Mm.
know, Bill Clinton was our hero, and yeah, that's yes, I believed all that stuff. But then somebody told me something about imperialism, and somebody made the connection, and walked me through the connection, with the what the U.S. does around the world, and what the U.S. does to us, people who look
Mm.
like us, people
Mm.
who live in our communities. And I was able to connect an issue like the crack epidemic to foreign policy, and it wasn't
Mm.
even hard.
Mm.
Once somebody opened the door a little bit of a crack and said, "Hey, did you know the CIA was involved in blah blah blah?"
Mm.
It wasn't hard to make that connection. So it's like, you know, the thing that people tell you, how you get caught up in conspiracy theories, right? It's like you go down a rabbit hole and you can't stop. Well, here's the thing: just because something is a conspiracy, it doesn't mean it's true. It's untrue. A conspiracy just means that this group of people is keeping something secret from you, or at least they're trying to.
Mm.
And this entire government is based on a whole bunch of conspiracies. But if we really want to know what they're doing, we can find out. It's because they don't actually hide it very well. So these issues are not little issues to me because I understand that they do affect us. These policies that create these scenarios that perpetuate poverty, that create housing crises, that jack up the cost of housing, that push working people to live in their cars or to live in the street, to
Mm.
push poor people onto the street. These policies are intentional. They're not like the unexpected, um uh
Consequence.
afterthought, or you know, the unintentional, accidental issue of something else politicians were trying to do, and they didn't realize, oh, this,
Mm.
we didn't know this was going to affect people this way, and oh, let's go fix it. No, no, no. They Once you go down this rabbit hole of understanding the truth of what this government is and what it has done domestically and internationally and how it's all connected, none of these things are little things.
Mm.
All of these issues are important to our very survival. So I guess this leads me, Dr. Tauheed, to ask this question:
Mm.
what do we do
Mm.
in the face of a government that, as you have said twice now, I think, on the show, that is completely captured by capital?
Yeah, yeah. We had part of this discussion last time about voting, right? About and we, at least in our discussion, we were talking about the November election and the need to vote, right? To use that tool, And the question was asked, well, why are we voting? It never changes anything. And we also mentioned that voting is a mobilization. It's getting you to do something. But we have to organize so that we can determine what our agenda is, so that when we're in the process of mobilizing, we can vote for people who will do what we need to do. And that starts at the local level. You're not going to organize and overturn the Congress, right? It's not going to happen that way.
What?
You're
You
going,
mean
you're
we're
going
not going to vote for some progressives and they're not going to go in there and turn the tables over and change stuff?
well, unfortunately, those progressives, if they've gotten to a point where they can raise the money, many of them that they need to get elected, they many cases already been compromised. People like AOC and um, 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 Sister St. Louis, and blanking on it, but
Oh, Cori Bush?
the Cory Bush. Those are surprises, right? They surprise the system,
Mm.
right? Because people in their jurisdictions have become so fed up with the status quo that they're desperately searching for someone else. So Cory Bush's defeat over the Clay, Congressman Clay,
Right,
Clay Jr., right, was because Clay has been there and has done nothing,
right.
right? But he was able to continue on because of incumbency. You can't count on that happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You have to organize, and organizing, you don't organize for the next. I mean, you can, if you had a candidate in your out of your organizing that you could believe could beat the Democratic or Republican incumbent who has been there and is doing nothing, then you should put that person up. But politics is in this sense is a practice, and you have to learn how it works, and you have to. I think you start that from bottom up. You know, school board and
Mm-hmm.
up and up. I mean, school board has become important.
See, yes, I have actually been saying this for years. When when I first saw the Tea Party movement emerge after Barack Obama's nomination, this was even before the man even had any national policies, and I'm like, these white people have lost their mind, but I know what they're about to do because, see, I belong to a church where a lot of those folks were members of the church. And I
Mhm.
heard all of the anti Black, the racist stuff. He's a secret Muslim sent by the Muslims to destroy America. And I thought, I mean, dang, he must be awful powerful. Y'all think he must be the most powerful Negro on the planet for you to think that he is going to destroy the United States all by himself. So I saw the way they organized in the churches with these little small meeting of crazy people who really believed that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. Now, of course, his imperialist policies and his disdain for poor Black people, that's that played out exactly the way it is, and he is who he is. But
Right.
when he was the nominee, I saw the way those folks began to organize. And I began saying then, listen, these people are organizing, they are meeting, they are making plans to take over community, state, and local governments.
Yeah.
If they don't win the White House after Obama's first term, they're fine with that because they
Mhm.
will have organized their way into enough grassroots operatives in key positions in these local governments that they could just move them right into the governor's house.
Right.
And from those governors, they could do a whole lot of different things. And look what happened. And people are just like, oh my God, how are school boards voting for taking slavery out of textbooks? You should have been paying attention to these people
Yeah. Yeah.
and stop and not and the mistake we made on the left, Dr. Tauheed, is that we wrote those folks off, the Tea
Mm.
Party folks, we wrote those off as crazy white people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did. And this is, I think, what we do very often with white supremacists in general until they kill a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
We write them off as crazy, unhinged, racist white people. We just need to ignore them, they'll go away. But they have taken the organizing playbook from the left
Mm-hmm.
and they
Exactly.
used it and they've used it against us. So
Yeah.
I just had to point out that I've been telling y'all, school board, I don't care what the local office is, school board, dog catcher, crossing guard, sheriff, judge, if someone at the local level is elected, then there needs to be people from within our communities who are cultivated to run in those elections
Yeah.
because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and I said also that we need to cultivate those new elected officials. We also need to protect them from corruption because the
Right.
system will corrupt them if we let them get too far away from us. We have to keep them safe. And part of the historical movement that has occurred for Black folks is that for certainly since emancipation, right? The federal government has been our friend, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We federal government emancipated us, and
Mm.
then for 100 years did almost nothing. But when they woke up in the '60s and wanted to protect us in the South, it was the federal government against states' rights and so forth and so on. That made it easy for someone like Bill Clinton to come along and as a quote savior at the federal level, right? Another first black president at the federal level, and to for the Democratic Party to completely ignore what was going on at the state level and below. We
Mhm.
ignored it. All of the power and all the resources flowed up to the federal level. And since the other side, now Republicans, didn't have that much or the kind of control they wanted at the federal level, they focused on what they could get control of.
Mhm.
And they're controlling these state legislatures. And they are almost controlling enough state legislatures to call a constitutional convention. If 2/3 of state legislatures were to vote to have a constitutional convention, that the Constitution as written, as poorly as it is it is in terms of its implementation, that would just go out the window.
Hmm.
And they would write a new they write slavery back into the Constitution, and we'd have to figure out if we want to stay or go. But we took our eyes off the local situation because we're focused on the national because it had always been the source of our salvation, quote salvation.
Mm.
But they, Tip O'Neill said all politics is local.
That's right.
He was absolutely right. And you don't get to have someone who's going to run for senator, U.S. senator, or president, and so forth, without having someone who's already understanding the politics at the state. I mean, even Obama was a state senator before
People forget that.
he was a state senator before he was a U.S. senator.
Hmm. People forget that. So we got a couple of questions here, and we're gonna wrap up for tonight. A proletarian pizza says, "Wasn't the Tea Party literally reared?" And then he said, "Created by the Koch brothers." No, no.
Okay.
The, the Tea Party has been around for a long time, much longer than when Obama showed up and was nominated for the made the Democratic nominee. The Tea Party was always like an anti-government, anti-taxation sort of fringe movement. They've been around for decades. They gained traction by attacking Barack Obama because no black man should be president of the United States. So they gained traction because they were opposed to the black guy, possibly living in the White House and telling the white people what to do. And is it true that there was a Koch funding to some Tea Party groups? Yes, that is true. But again, I cannot stress this enough. I don't know why people don't want to just believe this is true. The Tea Party didn't get this infusion of cash. They didn't just pop up on the scene one day on the National Mall in their tricorn hats with tea bags hanging off of them. And Ed Koch looked at them and said, "Hey, let's give those crazy people billions of dollars to advance our agenda." That's not what happened. Those folks organized locally, exactly how we're saying we need to organize locally, exactly how the left used to organize. The labor movement, the civil rights movement, they took the organizing strategies from us
Mm-hmm.
and built what's in Congress right now. And it took them, Obama was in office for 2 terms. Then you had Trump. It took them a decade to really build the kind of political power from the ground up that we're talking about. It took them a decade. And
Yeah.
they were willing to take that decade to eventually get to the White House. And they're
Right.
going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we continue to believe that right wing organizing is all funded by a few groups of white right wing, funders, capitalists, and there is no organizing, grassroots organizing being done by the right, we are making a tragic mistake. They are outnumbered by us, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think they out organize us, Dr.
Yeah.
Tauheed.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lesson in that in terms of the process of organizing to make sure that your organizing efforts don't become captured by the elite,
Right.
right?
Hmm. Right.
And so it does, for the Koch brothers, what the Tea Party wanted was somewhat aligned with their agendas. Now, not aligned with their, because what the Koch brothers want to do is make as much money as they can, and that's their agenda. And so to put in a free market neoliberal system which allows them to do whatever they want to do was not what the grassroots organizers for the Tea Party were about.
Right.
But you get the narrative, you get the catalyst of a Barack Obama, and now the Kochs can exploit that situation to eventually to still get what they want, to have laws
Hmm.
passed that allow them to get subsidies from U.S. government for fossil fuel, even while we have climate crisis. So the left, in terms of its organizing, has also to recognize the problem that people like George Soros, for example, who
Hmm.
are darling amidst some on the left, has
Right.
his own agenda,
Hmm.
and it's not a left agenda.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Last question from Commie Hill Figure. I love that name. What would you say if someone said the Republican Party could be transformed easier than the Democratic Party?
Mm,
What would
mm,
I say? You want to know what I would say? I
mm,
would say screw both of them. I would say I am not interested in reforming or transforming either of those parties because I don't believe that is actually true. I don't believe that any party that is beholden to this capitalist imperialist system can actually be transformed. I think that we have seen enough politicians who at least give lip service to the idea, particularly, in the Democratic Party. We've seen how easy it is to transform the Republican Party into the MAGA monster that it is. I don't see any utility in trying to not make them MAGA monsters. I think those people are very resolute in what they want. They're clear eyed in what they want. They want a white America with a white president, and they want the blacks and the browns to shut the hell up, at least be quiet so they can have their white America in peace. They want closed borders. We're clear on what they want, and I think we need to be clear that they are clear on what
mm.
they want. the establishment Republicans are sort of unhappy about the transformation of the Republican Party into the Trump Republican Party, but they're fine to go along for the ride to maintain power. They're completely fine with that. So why would I want to transform that party that is that comfortable with that level of just outright blatant depravity? No, screw them. But we've seen how people at least give lip service to the idea that, well, we're going to, run as a Democrat to transform the Democratic Party. And we see what happens. The Democratic Party, the machine, the capitalist backed machine of the Democratic Party eats those agents of change, those potentially transformational politicians, i.e., progressives, eats them alive, literally starves them of funding for their reelection campaigns. We see the Democratic Party now in the midterms actually contributing to the campaigns of Republicans who have denied the election in the ridiculous idea that they are elevating the worst possible Republican candidates to make it easier for them to win midterm elections. How'd that work out last time? That's how we got Trump. Okay, why would we want to transform a political party that not only does not have a platform that provides for improving the material conditions of oppressed people in this country, but also actively spends a whole lot of money making sure that the worst candidates of the other party get elected just because it might make them look good. I would say that we need to abandon both parties, this two-party system, and truly work on building political power that is people centered and focused, working class people centered and focused from the grassroots. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, the only thing I have to ask is that the organizing to transform or replace these parties is exactly the same work. It's not going to be any different. You have to get out, you have to educate and communicate with community to get them to understand that the things that they have they have power to not just in voting power, there's also economic power. They have the power where they spend their money. And maybe the choices now is not between a black phone company versus the myriad white phone companies. Maybe that's not the choice. But we do have some power to say this company versus that company based on who you support with your campaign contributions. We have that power, and so that's part of an organizing process that to me is going to be no different if we're going to organize to transform or organize to take or to replace. It's the same process. We have to do the same work. We have to build the same candidates. We have to have the same knowledge base built. Once we have that built, we can decide on whether or not we run as a Democrat or some other. We can decide, but we can't decide that. To decide that before we organize means we're going to be defeated either way.
Dr. Tauheed, thank you so much for another fantastic episode of Blackonomically Speaking.
Thank you. It's always been a pleasure. And we've talked about economics a little bit. We talked about a lot of other things, but I always tell my students everything's connected to everything else. So there's no just simply economic discussion that we can have. So when you were saying that people are wondering about you being in all of these little things, well, little things are all connected to other little things, and then you look at the whole system, you got a big thing.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for joining me. Dr. Tauheed, I'm going to stay on for a few minutes and talk to the folks. So if you want
Absolutely.
to hop off, that's cool. Thanks so much. We'll talk
Thank you.
soon.
Yep. Yep.
All right, folks. As always, I really, really appreciate you hanging out with me this Friday night. I can't tell you that these are going to be all the time regular because I don't know what my schedule is going to be like. But I do want to give folks who hopped on a little bit later an update. So I am okay. I'm very tired. Dialysis is going reasonably well. It's a lot to get used to. I am right now doing dialysis every day, 2 hours of dialysis every day during the week, and I get weekends off. Oh, thank God. Um, so as you can see, I've got I this thing is backwards. So as you can see, I've got this bandage here. This is the temporary catheter that they inserted so that I can do hemodialysis. This catheter is it draws blood from my jugular vein, and I had to move my hair back because it itches and I cannot scratch this part because it's still healing. Um, it is it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's I'm not even going to sit here and tell you that it's not overwhelming. It is very overwhelming, but I am taking this whole thing one day at a time. That is the best I can do. If I get through each day and I have not lost my mind, I figure I'm going to be all right the next day. So that's been working really well. Um, I have been approved, as I told you, I have been approved for the kidney transplant list. They also just approved my little transplant solicitation, kidney living kidney donor solicitation website. So I have to go and personalize the website, and I'll publish that for you all. If anybody who is thinking about being a living kidney donor, there are benefits. Travel is covered. Health insurance is covered. Lost wages are covered. All kinds of good stuff. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to really, really once again thank you all, particularly, especially you all in Black Power Media, so very much for your support, for your love. See, this is how y'all do. Thank you, V. Thank you so much. I am gonna get some potatoes. I was really excited because my nephrologist told me that this weekend I can have potassium heavy foods because my potassium levels were too low. And I had been, for about a year and a half, I guess since I was diagnosed a little, probably in April with CKD, I completely changed my diet. I did the research, I eliminated all the things that are bad for the kidneys. I haven't had oranges in like a little over a year. I love oranges. Hadn't had bananas, left out no potatoes, limited the tomatoes, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's actually, now that I'm on dialysis, the dialysis actually draws uh, minerals from you. So now I have to put those minerals back. So I can have potatoes this week. And my potato casserole is in the oven right now. I'm so excited this weekend. I can have potatoes, bananas, some oranges so that my potassium levels will be within normal range and I won't be so tired. Which they say is the problem, which is what's causing the tiredness. But I just wanted to let you all know that I really, really appreciate all the love and support. I am doing okay. It is a lot to deal with. It's a lot to juggle. My whole life is changing again. Um, this past year has been, I can't even describe what this past year has been. Since June 15th, when my sweetheart died, this whole year, June 15th of 2021, this whole year has been absolute chaos, and it's been hell, and it's been really, really hard to um, stay focused. And honestly, sometimes I felt like to stay sane, but um, I'm still here. I'm still alive. And I am going to do everything in my power to make sure that I stay right here. So, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Sorry about the connection issues with Black Power Media earlier. Hope you can catch the beginning of the show on the replay. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all so much. As always, a luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace, y'all.